And we will.
All right, thank you guys for coming out. This talk is Prowling. This is on pen testing or better pen testing. I'm actually going to move this down once because now I'm talking. It seems really loud. Better? Better. All right. I'm Wolf Gorlick. So a little bit about me. I'm involved with the local security community. I'm with a company called CBI where I build security programs. I'm with a company called CBI where I build security careers. And I talk with my hands and I drive video people nuts because I tend to pace a lot. So bear with me. But this talk is one in a series where I've basically been questioning some of the fundamentals, the fundamental principles that we say all the time in security. Like, for example, take one. We should secure like a castle. You guys have all heard that, right? We need to build security like a castle. Defense in depth, big, thick walls. The other one is one of my favorites where they're like, we have to be right every time. This is my favorite where they're like, it's so hard being in security because they only have to be right once. You know, you guys have all heard that one too. And so I've been poking at these and going back to some of our original sources, going back to some of our original materials, and trying to figure out how we've got to where we are and where we need to go. The castle one is particularly fun to me because, you know, it's like, we should build websites like castles and intranets like castles and protecting elephants with castles. That last one was kind of confusing to me at first. I'm like, elephants like castles? And that seems very Indian. But if you think about castles real quick, and I promise I'll get back to pen tests, what's interesting about castles is, one, they took like generations to build, like 20, 30 years to build a good castle. This is Harder Luck Castle. It's considered like one of like the prime examples of castles. And the other thing that's interesting, in addition to costing or taking decades to build, it costs a lot of money, like 10% of the revenue. So can you imagine you're building a security program, and bear with me, you go to the CEO and you go, look, boss, I want to build security like a castle. I need 10% of the revenue and give me about 30 years. They'll go over great, right? That'd be perfect. They'll be, sure, go ahead, do it. As a matter of fact, we in security get like 0.02% of revenue, and that's on a good day. That's according to Gartner. So castles suck. Castles suck. Absolutely suck. Another thing I was thinking about with the whole, like, we need to be right every single time, is moving away from castles and moving to something like constant monitoring, right? The idea that you don't necessarily need to keep the bad guys out. You just need to have enough bells that ring so you can respond and get the bad guys. And I like this as a good security model and as a good security metaphor. So basically what this series of talks has turned into is like story time with Old Man Wolf. I'm like, back in the day, they said build castles, and we're like, no! So please bear with me. But this is my take on pen testing. And I think it's really important to go back to some of these original principles, right? It's really important to go back and start thinking like a historian. Because in security today, we're this nascent industry, we like to tell ourselves. But there's so many good gems that people have solved and thought about and been arguing about forever. And I'm not talking about Lapadula, I can't even say it, Lapadula? Lapadilla? The like rollback access control, CSSP stuff that you have to learn. Everyone's like, I forgot that as soon as I learned it. All right, so we need to be historians, right? We need to be dangerous. We need to challenge some of these assumptions. So today, we're going to get a little dangerous. Today, we're going to get a little dangerous and look at pen testing and look at where it's come and where it's gone. See, if you think back to like 1967, right? 1967, which is well before a lot of us were born. It was like the summer of love, right? All you need is love was playing. The summer of love was going on in San Francisco. People were having a great time. Cars looked like this. Computers looked like that. The good old days, right? That's that 70s show. And around that time, Rand Corporation got together and they're like, you know, we're building all this computer stuff and we really should like have a bunch of people together. So they did a joint computer conference. Now, they brought together 1,500 people, so a lot bigger than Converge. I kind of feel jealous. I wish I had 1,500 people here, or 15,000 people. And they dared to ask, you know, this computer stuff we're building, could it be broken into? Well, what would that happen? It's like, yeah, it can. And they go, wait a minute, no one believes it could be hacked into. So I found the very first pen test report that came out of this. They actually hired a team to do a pen test. James P. Anderson, the OG of pen testing, 1972 writes a report. I tried to find James P. Anderson. It took me a long time to find an image of him. I finally did, and it said, best guess, senior citizen. So apologies, James P. Anderson, but we're all heading right there with you. So he wrote this pen test report, and it was a phenomenal report. You can find it online, and I'm not going to read this, but it's like, here's our attack scenarios, and the bad guys could break in, and we could have insider threat, and we could have, rogue state actors, and it really reads like a very well done report today. Not like the Iran Nessus report today from a pen tester, but a really good pen test report. Until you get down there, like, oh yeah, and you need to worry about Fortran. And what happens is like someone takes these punch cards and reads our source code. And you're like, wow, this is really the 70s. But this same concept of trying to break in existed well back then. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a long time ago. And my exposure to security came around like in 1982 with Tron, and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna get inside the computer, or like war games. I remember trying to explain to my daughter what he was doing there, and I thought it was really cool. Like, here's how a phone worked. And she goes, no, what I'm asking is, why does he just use the phone in his pocket? Like, we didn't have any. But we had punch cards, and that was cool. So 1972 to 2010, we basically been pen testing the same way, right? Why do you pen test? You pen test to demonstrate risk. You pen test to identify weaknesses and prove that it can happen and secure funding. And I swear to God, I was on a call with one of my sales guys like 2 weeks ago, and the customer's like, you know what I've decided to do? I've decided to pen test so that I could demonstrate risk and get buy-in for improvements. I'm like, oh my God, play the Beatles song. This is great. We keep doing the same stuff. Now, it's gotten a little bit better. 2008 to 14, of course, we get the NIST standard, and we get PTES, and everyone loves PTES, and no one likes NIST because it's heavy, but we get all that stuff. And PTES, of course, breaks it out and says, hey, we can do threat gathering and threat modeling and vulnerability analysis, and this is some really good steps and approach to pen tests. I love it. And NIST, of course, delves deeper and says, okay, here's the different ways we can do tests. But every one of these things is still looking at it from the perspective of, can we break into the system? Spoiler alert, we can break into the system. I think we know by now. We should all be there. And it's also like, well, how easy could it be for a malicious attack? Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, we get it. And so we keep having this broken record of doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? Trying to demonstrate the exact same stuff. And so I started thinking, maybe we're there. Maybe we've accomplished our mission. So I started re-evaluating how we do pen tests and why we do pen tests. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Yes, of course, you still need to do pen tests, and there needs to be kill chains and threat models. And yes, of course, you still need to do pen tests, and we need to do them for PCI and every single standard under the sun. Someone mentioned NYDFS earlier in this conference. NYDFS regs say thou shalt pen test. Yes, we need a pen test. Yes. But can we think of a different way of doing it? And I was looking at other areas where we've had this idea of focusing on the weaknesses. And as an aside, one of the things I do at CBI is I do this thing called the Academy, where we get junior talent in, like right out of high school, or right out of college, right out of high school. That'd be awesome. Right out of college, and we're like, hey, let me teach you all this stuff and get you some tools and experience and training, yada, yada, yada. It's great fun. But a lot of that coaching is based on StrengthsFinder. You guys available familiar with StrengthsFinder, like Clifton StrengthsFinder and everything, right? That was really a revolutionary concept in education. Because up until like the 50s and the 60s, they're like, you suck, and I'm going to help you suck less. And kids are like, thank you, please. I'll just hit me, and I'll keep writing, right? And then we started changing and going, what are you really good at, and how can I help you be more awesome? I'm sorry, I said you suck, and you're awesome. You guys can switch it up or attack me later. But you know what I'm saying? How can we help you be more awesome? Because you're great at organization, and you're great at woo, and you're great at communication. Can we build a team? Can we do that? This concept of building on strengths has really revolutionized education and coaching and a lot of different things. So why don't we ever do that in pen testing? Why are we so focused on proving again and again that, yes, I broke in and you suck and you didn't do good asset management and da-da-da-da? Can we flip the switch and move from identifying weaknesses to building on strengths? So I've started to call this prowling. It's really pen testing, just work with me. But I like this idea of prowling around, right? Because pen testing is like a point in time. I'm going to pen test your network this year, and then you'll have 12 months to remediate it. Awesome. And I'm going to tell you why you're weak. Great. But what about like month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, right? This idea of being a little more frequent, a little more continuous. Did you guys see like the MITRE talk earlier? That was awesome. That's what I'm talking about. The idea of like running these scenarios again and again and again, continuously. And asking some questions and validating our assumptions, because we have assumptions. We have ways that we're like, this is the way the world works. This is the way the network works. And IT is full of assumptions until the pen testers come in. So how can we focus more on building up the strengths and challenging those assumptions? And one way, of course, of defining strengths is our controls. We always hear about IT controls and what they are and what they're not. I'm going to just say ITGCs in this. These are our controls and our ways that we say, this is the way the world works. This is my defense. These are my walls. This is my castle, and this castle is mine. Right? Can we look at these ITGs as a way of building strengths? So that's what I'm going to talk to you today about. And I'm going to be using an example of, if you've seen any of my talks, I always go back to sitting duck shipping, right? But I'm going to play in the medical space. So sitting duck shipping decided to be in medical. I don't know why they opened a hospital. Who doesn't want to do medical today? I hear there's good money in it. So we're going to be talking about a hospital throughout this talk. We're going to be talking about controls and ways that we can challenge those assumptions and help build better controls. The next few slides are based on true events. Much like any movie that's based on true events, right? Like Amityville Horror, where it's like, based on true events, and you read the real story, and they're like, yeah, there was a book that fell off a shelf one time, but you watch the movie, and they're like, the monster came out. Okay, so based on true events. Not representative of any particular client, environment, hospital, friend, or client. If you're in the audience and you're like, that was my environment, Wolf, I told you that story in confidence. It's not you. It's based on true events. Same to the general audience. No individual client was harmed to this. But we're going to walk through this hospital. I'm going to share real-life horror stories that I've seen that we could suss out with this prowling concept, the concept of building on strengths and identifying what really works and what doesn't. A lot of times when you do assessments, you start with the interviews. And the interviews always look very pretty. And I know this, I'm getting married at the end of the year, so I've done all the wedding photos, and it looks gorgeous. Until you actually peel back the covers, right? You're like, wait a minute, he was standing in mud. Also very true. My photographer was great, but we did stand in mud. So as we go through this, the setup is very simple. Here is the pretty side of the screen that we all believe in. And here is what you find when you do prowling, when you do targeted pen testing, when you take these very strong assumptions we have and you put them to the test. Make sense? Cool? And of course, if anyone wants to interrupt me at any time, I'm really good with that, so feel free to. Let's start with one of the strongest controls ever, right? Which is encryption. Encryption shall be used on all computers with the potential of accessing health information. So you imagine we're all consultants. We sit down with the CISO of Sitting Duck, and you go, "Are you using encryption?" And the CISO goes, "According to HIPAA, we are, and all our machines are encrypted, and everything is great." And you're like, "That is phenomenal. Good for you guys. How'd you do that?" And they're like, "It was a project, but we implement it." And you're like, that's good, because if you look at data breach report, it's always the stolen laptop. It's always the case of the stolen laptop. And Sitting Duck Shipping will tell you the story about how, we had this case where the laptop had some health information, and it was a doctor, and he was doing some research, and he really shouldn't have done it, but he downloaded it into spreadsheets, and now they're on the computer, and someone snaked the computer out of the front of his car. And I'm like, man, that sucks. And he goes, it did, and we didn't have encryption. So we had to report it to OCR, and there's a breach, and we're going to fine us $2 million, but man, that allowed me to build my program. I'm like, that's great. It's a good story. So how do you know you have encryption on the devices? Because my IT guy tells me. Okay, great. With a prowling approach, what you do is you actually sample. And I don't mean you go up to someone and go, "I'm stealing your laptop. Can you walk out for just a second? Trust me, it'll be fine." But I mean, you actually do some validation of that, right? You actually technically validate that A, the encryption is on all the devices, B, that the encryption stands up. Because what oftentimes happens, and what we'll say happens in this scenario, is encryption is only on 80 devices, because help desk realized that it was slowing things down, so stop turning it on and didn't bother to tell anybody. And oh, by the way the doctors work is they just close their computer up, so it's not encrypted anyways. But it's okay because we're compliant, and now if there's you know what I mean? So you test these things out. You take a computer and you check it. Very important. Another one, and who was in here for Joel? It's Joel's talk? A couple of you guys? All right, I'm repeating this because he started to tell the story, and I'm in the back going, no, don't tell my story. And he's like, and then I'm like, no. All right, so very strong control. We use segmentation to isolate the medical devices from other networks. Very, very strong control. Now, when a security guy says segmentation, we mean what? We mean a VLAN and a separate subnet and an access control between that VLAN. And the medical devices are over here, and the hospital devices are over here, and maybe there's a guest Wi-Fi over there, right? That's what we mean when we say segment the network. When a network guy hears segment the network, he's like, oh yeah, separate subnet? Sure, we totally do that. Okay, great. Yeah, and then we just route any, because that's cool. But it's segmented, separate subnet. And so in this particular case, Sitting Duck Hospital thinks that they've got their segmentation going. And it's simply a matter of plugging into the network and scanning across those devices and seeing what can really talk to what. And very oftentimes what we'll find is that the guest Wi-Fi can talk to the main hospital network, that can talk to the medical devices, that can talk to the patient bed, that can talk over to the NICU where there's 40 different IoT sensors that are all pinging back and forth. Oh, and also, too, the EMR, the medical system, is on an old version of Oracle that can't be updated because it's 15 years old, and we're using legacy Java. But it's cool because we're segmented. See, testing those things out is so vital because you have this false sense of security that everything's fine until we actually go ahead and look at it. But it's all right, because should anything happen, the next control we have is networking monitoring is in place to prevent health information from leaving the network. So we say, good, that's fantastic, you got network monitoring going on. And then we say, okay, so it's between here and there, right? So like I've got my device on my segmented network, and now I've got a FTP or SFTP or Dropbox over here, and I'm going to post a file to that. And your sensor should light up, right? Yeah, it should totally light up, says the Sitting Duck CISO. Great, so I'm going to do that. Okay, do it. I did. No, you haven't done it yet. No, we just did. You want us to do it again? Sure, do it again. Copy some more files. No, you can't have done it yet. No, we did. But we're not seeing anything. Okay. So when they go to look at the super duper network monitoring system from vendor X, they find it's unplugged. And not like in the cool musical way. Maintenance happened, and during maintenance, they had actually unplugged the span port, moved the box over, brought it back up. CISO doesn't know this. The IT box, if you've done these network monitoring, right? The span port is not something you can generally monitor. It's read-only. It's getting all these packets. You monitor the network interface, which talks to the management station and everything. So like, hey, we've been pinging that thing the whole time. We've got monitoring set up. Everything's great. And you're like, good, it's up. Until you realize it's unplugged. These are all true stories. I had a long conversation where we went through several different interviews before we actually did the technical testing where they said, we absolutely positively can detect all those things. When it's plugged in. So the first principle about pen testing for validation or prowling is to ask the question, does the control even exist? And that sounds terrible. But so oftentimes we think the control does exist. It exists on paper. It exists in the network diagram. We talked about it. I'm paying maintenance on a FireEye appliance. What do you mean it's unplugged, right? We have the sense that everything is great and everything's cool until we go out and check it. So very first test we want to run, does the control even exist? All right, so back to Sitting Duck Hospital. Let's talk about some other things that we can do to build on strengths. Because once we find out the controls exist, we can move forward. If we find they don't exist, we can help them build that up, right? We can plug it back in. We can help the network engineer understand the difference between subnetting and segmentation. We can have these conversations to build on these strengths and make sure that we're aligned. So what else can we do as we move on? Well, let's talk about some other controls. So, for example, all access to the EMR is encrypted using TLS. EMR being your electronic medical system. These are your records. This is what the doctors get into when they're trying to make sure that they're updating patient records and reports and pulling down x-rays, all that sort of stuff. So all access is encrypted using TLS. So we sit down with the CISO and we say, is all access encrypted doing TLS? That's what HIPAA replies. And of course the CISO says, absolutely it is. HTTPS right there. And you go, that's great. What happens if someone types in HTTP? He goes, no one would do that. You're right. You're right. But you remember that unplugged FireEye? Okay, fine, type it in. So you type it in. And again, this is not like super elite, I'm going to be, the next DEF CON amazing hacker, where I'm going to have my lighter and go, watch, I type in HTTP, and now it's HTTPS. No, but you just simply run these tests, and you type in HTTP, and it goes through, and the CISO's like, well, that shouldn't happen. And now it shouldn't. But now the CISO's on fire. He's like, I'm calling the guy who manages this system. We're going to fix this right now. So he's got it on speakerphone, because he's going to show you, right? Because you're the consultant. He's going to show you that he's got it under control. You're like, great. So he gets the guy on the phone and goes, Bob, did you know that you could type in HTTP to get to the EMR? And Bob goes, yeah, of course. The CISO picks up the phone, gets it off speaker. And come to find out, yeah, it's faster that way. Much faster that way. But when they set it up, Bob, the IT guy, not only used HTTP, but put HTTP on the paper-like invite on how to use this, and put HTTP in all the browsers on all the links that the doctors use. You may wonder why they didn't see that. Again, I'll point you to the fact that the network monitoring was unplugged. Okay, so there's a problem. All the doctors are logging into the EMR with their creds over clear text over the internet for an indeterminate period of time, at least for the past 6 months that they rolled out the remote system. Kind of a problem. Now this, as we're talking through, is primarily around technical controls, right? Technical controls, but also physical controls still come into play, especially when you're talking medical records. Because you may say something like, hey, look, there are paper copies of all our health records, and these paper copies are cross-shredded and securely disposed. People have those controls? Yeah, you guys seen those? Have you guys also seen the recycle bins in airports? Has that ever made anyone mad? You go up to the airport recycle bins about this big, and there's plastic over here, and paper product over here, and waste over here. You guys seen this? Yeah? You ever open it up? I spend way too much time thinking about these things. You open it up, it's one bag inside. I'm like, I just recycled everything for you guys. It's all in the same bag. In much the same way, with Sitting Duck Hospital, we have a conversation about paper copies. And I said, that's great. That's a really strong control. How do you do that? And they go, they put it in a bin. I said, that's fantastic. Let's go look at those bins. And those bins are stored conveniently next to the trash bins. And I say, how does it get to the shredder? And the CISO goes, we're going to call the guy about that. I'm like, on speaker again? No, not on speaker. Damn it. So they call the guy who does the cross-shredding. He goes, yeah, I don't think we've had any paper records in a while. Come again? Housekeeping has been going through every night, tidying up the hospital floor and emptying both bins into one bag and dumping in the dumpster. Seriously, these are the things that happen. And you think, I am on top of the world. I've got all the great controls in the world, right? Nope. So while I'm trying to figure this out, there's this other control about visitors will be escorted at all times when in sensitive areas, including IT. So he's doing that. I'm going to go back to the IT. And hackers are impatient, aren't we? We're the type of people to open up a recycle bin just to check, and we don't necessarily want to wait in line. And I don't know about you, but I hate buzzing in and being escorted, and I obviously don't like wearing things around my neck, so I don't like lanyards. Hackers are weird. And so I go back to the space. The data center room is all secure. I go to the front area and I find these lovely, helpful nurses and doctors. And I say, hi, I'm with IT, and I smile. And the nurse goes, oh, are you lost, honey? And I go, I am lost. Can you help me out? Sure, it's right back there. Just take that elevator down. And then I'm in the IT area, which is great. So by the time the CISO comes back, I'm ready. I'm ready to meet him. So many stories can be told about circumventing physical security just with a smile, especially when the nurse calls you honey. So we all get this, but the point is, the second principle of prowling is this. Does the control exist was one. Is the control effective? Does it actually stand up to a determined attacker? And the determined attacker can be someone who does something as simple as type in HTTP or smile at a nurse, but does it actually stand up? And that is so critical, because when we're relying on these things, and we have to attest to our boards and our peers and our leadership that we have these controls, we really need to know, are they actually effective? And pen testing against a control that we say we have is much better that way than just trying to say, hey, finding a way to break in, because we all know they're going to break in. All right, so back to sitting duck shipping, back to building on strengths, back to building on our controls. And one more physical security one. All sensitive areas, including areas that store, process, transmit health information, will remain locked. MISEC, the Michigan Security Community, used to be hosted in one of my data centers. Secure facility, had swipe cards in both of them. And I invited these hackers in because I was like, I want to know what hackers do. This will be great. This will be fun. I got a free pen test. It was maybe not so great and fun, but very, like, the second time they're like, oh, look, we cloned your badge. I'm like, you did what? And I'm wondering, do I have to, like, report that to the SEC? If you are watching this, all stories are based on true events, not real events, SEC, I swear. Okay, but this is a true story. This comes from one of our guys named Reed Brosco. This thing under his sleeve is all James Bond style. It's really kind of cool. This is a cloner. He will walk up to someone and go, hey, how's it going? And with about as much time as I'm telling this story, he will have cloned that badge, and he'll walk up to the door and walk through it. Really freaking cool. And this is when we start getting past typing in HTTP into some more cool hacker stuff. So he will do full physical pen tests like this. And then, of course, do lockpicking and do safe cracking and all the other things, depending on the secure area you want. Kind of fun. So we're going to do that to our poor sitting duck hospital CISO. Which is okay, because they already let us in. So I don't think they'll mind if we go a few more rooms in. The other thing is, only authorized software is allowed to run on public-facing computers. AppLocker is amazing. We all love AppLocker, or insert application whitelisting, du jour, or whatever your preference is. Don't Coke or Pepsi me. But if you guys have seen any of my my talks on AppLocker, one of the fun things that you can do with it is create just a Word document and turn the Word document into a command prompt that will run everything under the word process, which is really kind of cool. So like the entire AppLocker process can be circumvented with a really cool Word document, and then you can call it Melissa for extra nostalgia points. And like 10 people in the room got that, and the other young ones are like, what? But anyways, the medical area looks something like this. We got a computer, we got the monitor and the little computer down here, and this in the cubby area, right? And this looks like every other waiting room ever. So first thing is, one of the things that almost everyone forgets, including sitting duck shipping, is that AppLocker and these types of controls are only in force when the computer's up. And a lot of computers forget, or a lot of people forget, that you can simply reboot into safe mode and then load up whatever you want, or change the AppLocker policy, or disable it, or create macros, or load a Word document, or anything you want to do. So first, perhaps we should encourage them not to allow those computers to be out. Secondly, which is also kind of fun, is if you look at the keyboard, the mouse, you could do fun things as well. So, for example, network access control, right? Network access control 101. We've got a fantastic network segment. We've talked to the IT guy. He's fixed it, right? And now we're only going to allow devices to plug into that device if they've got a good MAC address, right? So I trust your computer, you give me the MAC address, you can now plug into my segment. Life is good. Life is fine. Very simple MAC. What if someone comes and just simply does a passive network sniffer? With no cable security on the Ethernet box in this, you just pull that out, plug in your own cable, flip the computer up, and now the MAC address is going to go over that. Now you can do MAC cloning and plug in any device you want, right? So we do that. We demonstrate that risk. Maybe you guys should have cable lock security, we say, to Sitting Duck Hospital. All right. Also to keyboard loggers, which is always a lot of fun. But they couldn't do any of that because they don't have the password. Okay, fine. We'll just plug in a physical keyboard logger, leave it on for a while. It'll be great. So we do that. Some time goes by. Suddenly, there's a whole bunch of hustling in the CISO's area. There's a meeting. They're huddling. They got the CISO whisper. Have you guys ever seen the CISO whisper? Real strong CISOs have a CISO whisper. I love this idea. Their job is to go to the CISO and go, here's what's going on. So you get the CISO whisper together, and you're like, I need you to explain that I think we've been compromised. Can you tell the big boss? And the CISO whisper's like, okay, he should be okay around 9:15 because he'll have had his coffee then. CISO whisper goes in. Hey, boss, I need to talk to you. Seriously, these guys exist. They're fantastic. When I'm CISO next, I want to have a CISO whisper. But what ends up happening is the security team finds it to their credit. They find a couple of these key loggers, and then they panic, and then they freak out, and then they go to the CISO with the CISO whisper, and the CISO's like, I bet you that was Wolfgang. And then I get a call, and the device is returned to me. Like, don't do that again. But prove the point. And you did hire us to do a red team test. We actually had a security incident like that where they're very, very concerned. And I'm like, we're on site. You know we're on site. Well, anyone can get these computers. I know. Let's lock down those cables. So great idea just to prove that out and make sure those controls are really good. So the next rule of prowling is this. Can the control be circumvented? Can you get around the control? Can you bypass the control? If we've got a locked door, can you climb over it? If we've got hardening in place, can we break through it? If we've got app locker, can you run a module on it? Any of those things. Can we do past the hash and bypass that detection? Can we circumvent these controls? All right, Sitting Duck. Last one we're going to go over. I said in the beginning that one of my favorite ways today to think about security is this concept of bells on a string, right? Bells on a string that ring every time an attacker moves. Ideally, we have audit controls in place. The auditor says we have audit controls in place to monitor, record, and/or examine system activity. At this time, as someone is doing a test, you may go, did you notice when I did any of that stuff? Now we give them props for finding the USB keylogger, right? Awesome, you get props for that. But each one of these types of tasks, especially if we're rebooting things or unplugging things or trying different MAC addresses, right, as we're trying to get on these secure networks or scanning across, each one of these things, each one of these CTPs, the tactics, tools, and procedures, should be setting off alert. That alert should be logged and people should be responding and everything should be happening. If it's not, we've got these controls. Can we really trust these controls are strong controls? Can we really trust these controls are such that can protect our environment? So an example of this would be data loss prevention. We got data loss prevention installed. It's on our endpoints, it's on our devices, and you're like, great. So we take a look at the system, and we notice that some data had been leaking out. We don't know if that's a breach yet, but we notice through analysis data had been leaking out. And we send some files out, and we verify that, yes, indeed, the data loss protection is catching our activity where I would chase it down. You go, great. CISO, can you talk to Steve in security operations and say, hey, can you trace this down? You're like, yes. We've got data loss prevention. We can do this. And Steve calls up Jane, and Jane looks at you like, huh? What do you mean trace down the data? We spent days in one engagement with a hospital trying to trace down the source of the data leaving, and they couldn't do it. They had data loss prevention. Sweet. Can you investigate an incident? No. And why? Why is that? Why is that? One of the main reasons is because they hadn't been running exercise, they hadn't been running drills, they hadn't been responding to these. It's all about that muscle memory, right? If you think about the MITRE ATT&CK framework or what we heard with safe breach and all these sort of things that we've been hearing over the past couple of days, it really boils down to that muscle memory. And had they had it happen a few different times, or built a run book, or had a metric on it or whatnot, they would have been in a really good place to actually trace it down. Oh, well, it's on the 3rd floor, it's this computer, it's probably your guys again doing a passive network sniff, can you please have them stop doing that? And you go, you caught us, thanks. But they couldn't. And that gets us to the very last validation of assumptions, which is, are these controls operationalized? Do they really, truly not only stop the bad guys, but are in such that people can respond to them? That's quintessential bell on a string. So, with Sitting Duck Hospital, we want to take that top-down approach, identify what controls they have in place, have some interviews, read some policies, do some walkthroughs, figure out as a CISO what we are saying we can defend against. Here is our line in the sand, here is our defense. We recognize that the bad guys can probably go left, bad guys can probably go right, but right here we're strong. We want to start there, and we want to go against that strength and make sure it's really as strong as it is. By making sure it exists, it's effective, it can't be circumvented, and it's operationalized. And we're going to do so with some of the fun pen test tools that we all like. Some of these examples have been really simple, but a lot of them can be much more complex. We've got encryption on an EMR drive. The EMR drive is maybe hot and live, but it's an RAID array, and that RAID array is only available to this particular network segment, and that particular network segment needs to be on the manager LAN to get to it. Great. So we're going to go to the manager LAN, we're going to clone one of those MAC addresses, we're going to plug into that, we're going to get over to there, and then we're going to execute a couple commands. We're going to recognize that telnet's been left up on the RAID array, and we're going to do something fun, right? Things like that. It can be a little more complex, or find a vulnerability and try to exploit it. But as long as we're still in the position of always trying to break in, I fear that we don't get to that. I fear that we don't get to that point. And when we identify those gaps, when we identify, hey, it exists, it's effective, but you know what? We can still bypass it. And no one really notices what we're doing. Then we can come up a list of what we're going to mitigate. And prioritize and do what we always do, right? Mitigate some of the things, right? We can fix some things. And tackle what we need to off of that list. So in conclusion, and then I'll open to questions, and if you guys don't have any questions, I have a little bit of bonus material. In conclusion, 1972, the year of Watergate, for crying out loud. Nixon, 1972, when the television was the Waltons and MASH. 1972. The OG, if you take nothing away from us, right? James P. Anderson, and I like that. It almost sounds like someone off the Matrix. Hello, Mr. Anderson. James P. Anderson, the OG of computer security, did the very first pen test. And for 45 years, we've been trying to do the same thing. Focusing on the weaknesses, trying to poke holes, trying to show that people could break in, right? For 45 years, we've been doing the same thing. Doing it once every 2 years, maybe once a year, and trying to give them a list of things and hope they remediate. 45 years, we've been going around the cycle. And at the same time, of course, we're still getting breached. At the same time, all the doom and gloom you guys all know. At the same time, I don't know that it's necessarily been effective. And I think we need to get to the point where we're doing less penetrating and proving we can get in and flipping over the table, and more prowling. We're moving around, we're investigating the system as a whole, and we're having good conversations in a continuous way. Hey, you thought this, it's really this. Hey, you thought that, that's awesome. Hey, you thought this, you caught us. Good for you. Hey, you thought that. Hey, you found that USB key. Dang it, I was hoping you wouldn't. Right? This constant move and shift is really where I think we need to get to so that we can begin to make some serious progress. Questions, and then I got a bonus round if you guys don't have questions. So you really want to ask questions. You don't want the bonus round. People are like, I kind of do want the bonus round. Yeah, sir.
What's the bonus round?
Oh, no. Terrible question. Next one, Brent.
So you bring up prowling as penetration testing, but what you're describing, isn't that the role of audit? Is to check your control and make sure they actually are working.
So today, where security fails is in two spots. Between the people and where the people meets the machine. And so the question is, isn't that really the role of audit? But I would argue, network segmentation example was a problem between a security guy and a networking guy. Application security is a problem between the developer and the security guy, right? Today, oftentimes, the problem with audit is between the security guy and the auditor. Auditors think high level, do you have this control? Can you demonstrate it to me once? Are we good? Pen testers think bottom up, right? Can I break in? Does this control work? Can I figure out this puzzle? You've got a wall. Can I scale it? What can I do? And we today do not unify those two worlds. And so oftentimes if you read a compliance report, I was in finance, I used to love the SOC 2 report. We were great. And my pen tester was like, yeah, but. And you should probably look at your doors. I mean, you know what I mean? There's no connectivity between those. There's no connective tissue. So is it the role of audit to identify controls? Yes, but I think we need to bring in those technical validation and the pen test skills to make sure that what the auditors say is really true.
Is there an element to this maybe that you try to give a client an opportunity to have a win?
Yes.
That's something you can praise them for in addition to all the things you're going to tell them is wrong?
Yeah, I'm kind of telling war stories, but I absolutely, like, for example, when you find that the USB key sniffer, absolutely that's a win. And that's what's cool about operationalizing. Because when you get to that operational state and you're able to say, hey, you caught me. Awesome. And as the program becomes more mature, when organizations do this over and over again, you can also gamify that. How fast can you catch me? Right? And when you catch me, let's all go out and go for pizza. I was with a team we used to do pen tests, and we had a gong, like a big dong, you know what I mean? War gong. And I actually wanted like a war horn, but that got vetoed. So whenever they did anything awesome, just hit the gong. It didn't matter what, everyone stopped what we were doing, we all went for froyo. And then when we were getting froyo, you're like, what'd you do? What was awesome? Like, I did this. Like, that's amazing. So you're absolutely right. You want to create conditions where we can celebrate those wins and reinforce that behavior, because fundamentally what we're trying to do is make a better system and a better game. All right. He wants to know what the bonus materials. Yeah.
Not so much a question as a comment that, back to that auditing question, the auditors have a lot of things to look for.
Yes.
Like you said, you're focused on a few samples, but if we as the security guys are waiting for them to get around to check what we've done, they're not going to look at all the controls. And if we haven't checked it ourselves and verified that we did it right to begin with, they're going to crucify us.
Yeah.
And they should.
Right. So the point there is, by doing targeted pen testing, by doing technical validation, by doing prowling of your controls, you can make sure that they really do exist and are right before the auditors get there. Especially external audit. You got to beat external audit, right? Yeah, and this gets back to the idea of as a CISO or security leader or whoever, what am I attesting to? What am I saying? And is what am I saying really accurate? And the higher you go up in leadership and the further you get away, I think like you always talk about like layer 8, I think management is like probably layer 10, because you got to go to like 2-3 layers deep before you can get to the technology. We lose sight of that, and we don't necessarily have the visibility into that. So I like what your point is, which is we need to get ahead of the auditors and make sure what we're saying is true, lest someone else find it for us. Anything else? Once, twice? All right. I got 5 minutes. Quick bonus round. 3 things that you guys need to ask when doing these types of tests. 3 things you need to ask about any security. 1, is what you're securing worth the cost of your security? I would direct your attention to the flip-flops. So oftentimes, we have this great excitement and passion for security that we oftentimes, I believe, try and over-engineer it. Joel's talk earlier about everyone thinks they just don't have enough money is a great point. There is a martial art that I absolutely love, and I absolutely can't remember the name of it right now because I was absolutely up way too late with a bunch of hackers last night. But it was based in China when China took away all the swords. They took away all the swords. They took away all the military arms. Only the samurai and only the masters of the kingdom could. So what the villagers did is they developed entire martial art around a shovel and a rock. It's like shovel rock Kido. God, I can't remember the name of it. But anyways, Someone's going to like watch the video and tease me about this on Twitter. It's really this. But the point is really with anything you can make a good defense. And as long as you can start that defense and know what that is and accept there's areas on both sides you can't control, I believe we're in a good spot. It's where we have the false sense of security or try and boil the ocean, we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. Number 2, this guy corrected me on Twitter. Thank you. We all make mistakes. All of us do, all the time. Gartner had this thing that was just mind-boggling to me. They said by 2020, 95% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault. I'm like, thanks, Gartner. Did you just call us users stupid? What the hell? There's another thing that I read recently. I've been reading a lot of user design books and going, again, back to original principles. And 70 to 95% of industrial accidents are caused by people. And they're like, oh, are people incompetent? And this is a quote from the book. They're not incompetent. It's a design problem. If we design our security controls where people continue to make the mistakes, that's a design problem. And I think fundamentally, if you think about like all the S3 buckets that keep leaking data everywhere, design problem. So next thing we have to ask ourselves when we're designing these prowling tests is, hey, what mistakes are being made again and again and again that we're like, oh, that's the user fault. Maybe it's user design. User design not necessarily of the interfaces of the systems, but user design of our ISMS, our IT security system itself. What have we designed wrong that is causing people to have these problems again? Number three thing you have to ask yourself. Design decisions. What design decisions have we made that cause us to make those mistakes, right? We do it all the time. We all are making decisions every single day. Be it a policy statement, be it a technical control, be it the way we put an app locker, be it the way we rolled out BitLocker. And each one of these design decisions, if you think about the doctors who just closed their laptop because it took too long to decrypt. Well, A, should we have allowed them to do that? And B, is there some conversation we should have about the importance of it, or maybe optimizing the speed, changing the way we're doing encryption, things like that, right? When all those boxes are deployed into a hospital and all the cables are out in the open, maybe we should have some conversations about that. When we laugh because the janitor's been taking the shred box and the regular paper box and dumping them in the garbage, absolutely, that was ridiculous, but maybe we should have some conversations about changing the design of the boxes or where we place the boxes or how we train people, right? Fundamentally, we make a whole bunch of decisions, and the corporate environment and the technical environment and the ISMS, the systems management system that we put in place for security, is causing behavior that will open us up to these problems. And I believe with Prowling, with going through and doing these types of testings and then doing root cause analysis, we can actually get to a more humane, empathetic type of security because we know, hey, you've made that problem. You made the problem again. You made the problem a third time. By the third time, I don't think it's them. Maybe it's us. And maybe there's a better way that we can present it, design it, and enforce it. And that takes me right to time. So thank you all. I really appreciate you spending time. I hope you guys have a great Converge.